Most people think they're blocking wealth because they don't work hard enough. So they push harder. They stay busy. They consume more information. They try to stay positive. They repeat affirmations they don't fully believe. And they keep waiting for life to finally respond. But what you have to understand is this. Wealth is not only connected to effort. It is connected to the way you see yourself. And most people never realize that the real block is not outside them. It's hidden in the emotional patterns they repeat every day without noticing. You can want abundance consciously while rejecting it subconsciously. You can say you want more money while carrying guilt about success. You can dream about freedom while feeling unsafe receiving more. You can work for years and still operate from emotional scarcity. That contradiction changes everything. Because life doesn't only respond to what you say you want. It responds to what feels familiar to your nervous system. Think about it. If stress feels normal to you, peace may feel uncomfortable. If struggle feels familiar, ease may feel suspicious. If you spent years connecting money with pressure, disappointment, conflict, or fear, your mind starts treating wealth as something emotionally dangerous. Not logically dangerous, emotionally dangerous. And this is where most people get trapped. They keep trying to attract wealth while unconsciously protecting themselves from it at the same time. Now stay with me here. A person can have skill, intelligence, ambition, and opportunity, yet still keep recreating limitation. Not because they are incapable, because their identity has adapted to survival. There's a difference between wanting wealth and feeling safe with wealth. Most people never examine that difference. They only look at external results. They ask, why isn't it happening? Why do I always end up back in the same situation? Why does progress disappear every time things start improving? The truth is, the subconscious mind cares more about familiarity than possibility. It wants what feels known, even if what feels known is painful. That's why people repeat emotional cycles for years. Not because they enjoy suffering, because the mind keeps returning to what it recognizes. And if struggle became part of your identity early in life, success can start feeling emotionally foreign. Let that sink in. Some people were raised hearing things like, money changes people. Rich people are selfish. You have to suffer to deserve success. People like us never get ahead. Maybe those words were never questioned. Maybe they became emotional truth before you were old enough to think critically. And over time, those ideas stopped sounding like opinions. They started feeling like reality. This matters because the subconscious mind does not respond strongly to logic alone. It responds to repetition and emotion. If a belief is repeated enough during emotional moments, the mind accepts it as instruction. That instruction quietly shapes decisions, habits, reactions, expectations, and self-worth. So, someone may consciously pursue wealth while subconsciously expecting disappointment. And expectation changes behavior in ways people rarely notice. They hesitate before opportunities. They undercharge for their work. They sabotage consistency. They avoid visibility. They feel guilt after earning more. They spend impulsively after financial progress because part of them still believes they do not deserve stability. Then they look at their life and assume they simply need another strategy. But the deeper issue is identity. You do not consistently move toward what contradicts who you believe you are. That's why temporary motivation rarely creates permanent change. A person can feel inspired for a few days. They can visualize success. They can repeat powerful words in the mirror. But if their internal identity still says, I'm behind, I'm not enough, I always struggle, nothing ever works for me, the old pattern eventually pulls them back. This is why wealth is not only financial. It is psychological, emotional, energetic. And many people are trying to change outcomes without changing the emotional state creating those outcomes. Think about someone who constantly worries about money. Even when opportunities appear, their mind remains focused on loss. They become reactive, fear-driven, tense. That emotional state affects perception. They stop seeing clearly. They rush decisions. They cling to what feels safe. And survival thinking starts controlling their behavior. Survival thinking narrows possibility. A fearful mind struggles to create freely because it is focused on protection. Now, this does not mean you should ignore practical reality. It does not mean pretending problems do not exist. What it means is that your emotional relationship with money influences the actions you take every single day. And most people underestimate that influence. For example, two people can have the same opportunity. One sees possibility. The other sees risk. One believes growth is natural. The other expects failure. One feels capable of receiving more. The other feels they must constantly prove their worth. Externally, they may look similar. Internally, they are operating from completely different realities. And over time, those internal realities create different outcomes. Because identity shapes behavior. Behavior shapes repetition. Repetition shapes results. This is where everything changes. The goal is not to force wealth into your life through desperation. The goal is to stop reinforcing the emotional patterns that push it away. And one of the biggest patterns is constant internal lack. Many people spend years mentally rehearsing what they fear. They wake up already worried. They check their bank account emotionally. They compare themselves to others. They feel behind before the day even begins. That emotional state becomes familiar. Then familiar becomes automatic. Eventually, the mind starts treating lack as identity instead of temporary circumstance. And once scarcity becomes identity, even improvement can feel unstable. This is why some people experience financial progress and immediately lose it. Not because abundance disappeared, because their nervous system still feels normal in struggle. So unconsciously, they recreate what feels emotionally familiar. Now think about how powerful this is. Your subconscious patterns influence not only what you tolerate, but what you expect. If you expect disappointment, you prepare emotionally for disappointment. If you expect rejection, you hesitate before action. If you expect failure, you protect yourself before fully committing. And that protection often looks practical on the surface. People call it realism, caution, being responsible. But sometimes it is fear wearing the mask of logic. The truth is, many people are not afraid of failing. They are afraid of changing. Because real wealth changes identity. It changes habits, relationships, standards, decisions. And part of the mind resists change because change feels uncertain. Even positive change. This is why inner work matters. Not as a trend, not as spiritual performance, but because your internal state influences the quality of your external life. What you repeatedly feel becomes easier to believe. What you repeatedly believe becomes easier to act on. And what you repeatedly act on becomes your reality. Now stay with me for a moment. Imagine someone who spent years believing they were unworthy of success. Even if life gives them opportunities, they may unconsciously reject support, delay action, or settle for less because their identity still reflects limitation. Then imagine that same person slowly changing their internal relationship with themselves. Not through empty motivation, through awareness. They begin noticing their automatic thoughts. They stop speaking about themselves with constant defeat. They stop emotionally rehearsing scarcity every day. They stop treating struggle like proof of value. That shift may seem small at first, but internally, something important begins happening. Their nervous system starts learning that safety does not require limitation. And once the mind stops associating wealth with danger, guilt, or pressure, behavior begins changing naturally. Confidence becomes less forced. Decisions become clearer. Opportunities become easier to recognize. Consistency improves because fear is no longer controlling every action. This is why true transformation is rarely loud. It happens quietly. A different thought, a calmer reaction, a new standard, a moment where you stop identifying with the old story, and over time, those moments reshape identity. Most people wait for external evidence before changing how they feel. But internal change usually comes first. That does not mean instant results. It means you stop feeding the emotional state that keeps repeating the same experience. You stop treating scarcity like your permanent identity. You stop defining yourself by old conditions. Because the truth is, your current situation is not necessarily your permanent reality. And this is important to understand. You are not broken. You are conditioned. There's a difference. Conditioning can change. Patterns can change. Beliefs can change. Emotional associations can change. But first, you have to become aware of what you've been unconsciously rehearsing. You have to notice the hidden thoughts running beneath your daily life. Thoughts like, "I'll probably lose it anyway." "Success is for other people. I'm always struggling. I can never get ahead." Those thoughts carry emotional weight. And repeated emotional weight becomes identity. Now think about the opposite. What happens when a person starts relating to themselves differently? Not arrogantly, not pretending, but calmly recognizing, maybe I don't have to keep living from survival. Maybe I can stop expecting lack. Maybe my past conditioning is not the final truth about me. That openness creates space for change. Because wealth is not only about money entering your life. It's about becoming the kind of person who can receive, hold, and expand it without self-destruction. And that begins internally. The moment you stop seeing yourself as permanently limited, your decisions begin changing. Your standards change. Your focus changes. Your emotional state changes. And eventually your life starts reflecting that shift. Not because the universe suddenly picked favorites, because you stopped reinforcing the identity that kept repeating the same outcome. So, if you've been feeling stuck financially, ask yourself something honestly. What emotional state have you been practicing every day? Fear? Pressure? Scarcity? Guilt? Self-doubt? Or possibility? Trust? Self-respect? Openness? Because your inner world is not separate from your external results. It shapes them continuously. And once you understand that, you stop chasing wealth from desperation. You begin creating from a different state entirely. A calmer state, a clearer state, a more grounded state. That is where real change begins. If this video helped you see your patterns differently, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share in the comments what belief about money or success you are starting to question after listening to this. And if you're ready to go deeper into the subconscious patterns that shape your reality, there's a program designed specifically to help you rewire the emotional conditioning connected to wealth, self-worth, and abundance. The link is in the description and also in the pinned comment. Because once you become aware of what has been controlling your inner world, you can finally start building a different outer one.